Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome, Patriots, to another edition of the Raising Cain Show. You're going to have to forgive my icon tonight. I logged in tonight and my camera, for whatever reason, is broken. It is not working. So my guest does have a working camera, though. So we're going to just move along. And that's why we're running a little bit late tonight. But you guys are definitely not going to want to miss this show. We're going to be talking about something that has been actually one of the very few things that Congress seems to have some bipartisan agreement on, and something that should concern every American, and that is Chinese ownership of American farmland. So stick with us. We are going to jump right into it with our guest, AJ Richards. And but before we do, I'm going to run the commercials. That way we can have an unfiltered and complete conversation without any breaks in that. So we will be right back after a short commercial break. Stick with us.
Heard of Q Broadcast? It's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q Broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Starz. And the best part? There are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
Since 2017, 150,000 farms have shut down. Working farmland has been reduced by 21 million acres. The system has been crippling the remaining farmers, forcing some to adopt nefarious farming techniques, like pumping hormones and other performance-enhancing drugs into their cows so they can survive in crammed feedlots. Or the farmers are forced to jump ship and sell to land-hoarding, profit-chasing agricultural oligarchies, who use their billions of dollars to crush the competition and increase your family's dependence on their manufactured food. What could possibly go wrong? The family farm will soon be a thing of the past, unless you do something. You can. That's why there's From the Farm, an industry-disrupting platform that connects consumers directly with local farmers, which means you can buy fresh, non-factory farm food, and you'll know exactly where your food came from and how it was raised. For the first time in nearly 100 years, independent farms will have a way to not only survive, but thrive. From the Farm was founded by A.J. Richards, an active homesteader, and Brooke Entz, a CrossFit Games athlete and an Amazonian warrior in the movies Wonder Woman and Justice League. She clearly has a passion for healthy food and a healthy lifestyle. And since both AJ and Brooke come from generations of ranchers and farmers, they know what they're talking about. We can't do this alone. We need the strength of the American people behind us. Help us build a new food system that combines the wisdom of the past with the technology of the future. Investing in From the Farm isn't just a financial decision. It's an investment into our future, our small family farms, and our food sovereignty. Invest today.
Welcome back to the Raising Cain Show. Folks, I want to thank and welcome our guest, AJ Richards. You just saw that commercial for the things that he is doing. And we're going to be talking about a very important issue, a national security issue, and that is the alarming threats that are facing our farmland with China and other foreign entities purchasing American farmland. Our guest, AJ Richards, founder and CEO of From the Farm, has spent years on the front lines of the food supply chain. Through his work in agriculture, slaughterhouse operations, direct-to-consumer food sales, and national policy conversations, AJ has seen firsthand how vulnerable America has become. He's here to expose what foreign land ownership means for our food security, our national independence, our health, and the future of rural America. This conversation goes far beyond farming. It's about sovereignty, security, and whether America will be able to feed itself in the decades ahead. AJ, thanks so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nate. I appreciate it.
So, this issue is one that has been brought up quite a bit, from various people within the different security councils and the different groups within Congress that have looked at this issue. It seems to be a bipartisan issue that, why in the heck does China keep buying up land? And, and why are we allowing this? I mean, to start with, just to give a little bit of context for people, we're not talking about a huge amount, right? It's like, I think China owns, it's like around 1% of the foreign owned land, right? But
Yeah.
Here's the problem, folks. And this is kind of, to me, the way I look at it. Number one, China is a recognized adversary of the United States. They're not a friend. This would be like allowing Cuba to own land, or Venezuela, or Russia. Why would we allow them to own any land other than maybe their embassy? That would be the only thing that I would say, would be. And to be honest with you, I'm even kind of like ambivalent about any land being owned by a foreigner. I am perfectly okay with, say, a 99-year lease, but why would we give up something that we can't create more of to a foreign entity, period? Because China, for example, is one of the few. Now, there are a lot of countries, a lot of our allied nations that we can, as Americans, go buy land in their countries, right? And they are able to buy land in ours. But interestingly enough, China is one of those countries that has no reciprocity whatsoever, meaning that any American that wants to own land in China cannot own land in China. But the Chinese can somehow own land here. How in the hell did this ever happen? So this, to me, is like kind of like the biggest, regardless of what we decide to do as a nation in terms of foreigners owning land here, this should be clear and very easy to understand. We don't allow countries to own land here who don't allow us to own land in their countries. That, to me, is just kind of a given, make sense, common sense type of thing. But there are other issues. So I want to go ahead and hand it over to you. That's my little bit of standing on my soapbox. I ran for Congress, and this was an issue that I brought up on the campaign trail because my belief was that we should not have people owning land in this country who are not citizens. Because the whole point and purpose, right, of the originally of voting was that those who were landholders were the ones who primarily voted because they were getting representation for themselves. So it makes no sense to allow anybody who is not a citizen of this country to own land in this country. That's just my personal opinion. But AJ,
Yeah.
why don't we go ahead and kind of start with, the big one, right? Why should Americans be alarmed about China buying U.S. farmland?
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying that foreign nation ownership of farmland in general just takes that production out of the hands of American citizens that would otherwise prioritize their countrymen. And so you're right, China doesn't own a lot, but what they do own seems to be concentrated around military bases, which is
I
very
wonder
concerning.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the largest chunk is in Texas. It's something like 100. So, all told, they had about 350,000 acres that they owned in the United States. Now, the good news is it's starting to drop because we we're paying attention to that now. And so there's a lot of cancellations of contracts and things being changed. There's still there's still close to 300,000 acres of farmland that they own. Um, but Texas has the largest amount, which is 100,000 acres, and it's a wind farm. And so that's concerning. And that wind farm is actually right next to, um, let's see, it's Laughlin Air Force Base. And so there's some concerns about, China owning farm ground that also has wind farm on it, and the wind farm is providing energy, and so then controlling the energy source there as well.
Yeah, that's kind of disturbing because, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I have nothing against the Chinese people. What I have a problem with, though, is when these countries that are adversarial to us, that have been basically working against us, trying to destroy our economy, trying to infiltrate our universities, trying to spread, basically this anti-American, you know, uh, uh, attitude, if you will, to our young people. That's basically, they are adversaries. They spy on us. They have it. When I worked for NSA, and my job there was as a cyber protection team member, and we went after hackers hacking our national critical infrastructure. Speaking of wind farms and energy, right? That was one of the big areas. And by far, and when I say by far, folks, I mean we had multiple teams dedicated to various what they call APTs, or advanced persistent threats, that were Chinese in origin, or CCP or in origin.
Mhm.
But all of the other ones were basically handled by one team. So China basically had several teams, and then you had Russia and Iran and Syria and North Korea. They were all like handled by like one team, because that's how much China was hacking us. It was
Wow.
multiple teams having to be dedicated to them. So the fact that we would even allow them to do anything in our country, it just blows my mind how this is even allowed, especially owning land and then owning that land near military bases. We just found out, right, through the Secretary of State Rubio, that
Mhm.
China had taken contracts in the Panama Canal. And I can tell you from sources that I know that China had set up basically electronic warfare listening devices all along the canal, so that when our naval ships are going through, they're basically conducting surveillance on our ships in that port. That's one of the main national security issues, that why Trump was so adamant about getting China out of that contract and threatening that we would take back the Panama Canal if they did not remove China from that contract. We had, under the Obama administration, Chinese contractors getting control of our ports, and one of those was the port of LA. And Chinese contractors had control over the contract for all of the stuff coming into the port of LA. Now think about that. The
Yeah.
the port where things come in, and that's also where things are shipped out, right? That is, if you wanted to bring, say, a nuclear device into this country, or some sort of virus, or some sort of, threat to this country, that's one of the things that you would likely need, would be, you would have to have control over our ports. So believe me, China is not a friend of the United States, especially while they are under the control of the CCP. The CCP the Chinese Communist Party. They are absolutely the enemy of the United States, as well as every other communist party around the world, and those, including those that are here in the United States.
Yeah.
Communism should be banned, period. They should have
Yeah.
no business in this country.
Yeah, and we know that anybody that is Chinese is beholding to the CCP, whether they live here or
That's
not.
right. If they are a Chinese citizen,
Mhm.
absolutely. A perfect example of this, and I know we're a little off topic, but it's somewhat related, right? We
Yeah.
just had, and of course, this is my area of expertise, cybersecurity. We just had a breach, a major breach in Microsoft Azure. And Microsoft Azure, of course, is one of the largest cloud providers, along with like I think AWS and Google Cloud are kind of the three biggies, right? But Microsoft Azure, turns out they had, and I knew this from just a couple of years back when I was researching, that Microsoft was notorious for using the H-1B visa program to bring Chinese nationals into this country who were willing to work for less, next to nothing. So number one, they do this in order to get cheap labor, and that ultimately hurts, those Americans that are looking for jobs. But that's what they were doing. They're bringing in cheap labor, and they were hiring Chinese nationals. And then it turns out those Chinese nationals were in fact compromising this cloud provider. And by the way, that cloud provider is in almost every, it's being used by almost every federal agency across the land, as well as many other state and local. So, and of course, private sector companies as well, but private sector companies that do things that are part of the national critical infrastructure. And without a doubt, farmland is part of the national critical infrastructure.
Hmm.
So this is kind of interesting because there's already a law that is in place that says you cannot have anything that is produced. Now, granted, this is primarily tied to technology, but it basically says that anything that is used that's part of the supply chain for national critical infrastructure cannot have any involvement with China. And it lists China along with, I think it's like four other countries. And I think they are, basically the communist nations, right? As well as Russia. But it's
Yeah.
like Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, and Iran, and in China. So
Yeah.
it's crazy that we would even allow them to buy land and then allow them to buy it right next to to a military base. These guys are our adversaries.
Well, I think it just goes to the complacency that we've been in as a nation for so long. Um, we have been complacent all the way up until COVID, and then COVID really kind of woke up our nation and the vulnerabilities that we face throughout many different industries and sectors. But that complacency was what allowed this to happen in the first place. And now we have folks like Secretary Brooke Rollins, who has many times called out the the danger of China owning farmland and how that can't be. And so they're looking for ways to repeal that. It's you get into government and things get so complicated where the average the or the everyday citizen just looks and says, "Well, this is wrong. Why can't we just take it away?" But we've got so many checks and balances in place that unfortunately hamstring us from doing things that are common sense in many
Yeah.
areas, in many ways. And she
Well,
has said many times, yeah,
yeah, and this is part of the problem too, right? It's not just like some local Chinese citizen or whatever owns the land, right?
right,
Oftentimes, these are investment portfolios that are made up of, and I don't even know if that's even being I don't know if that is even counted in what the GAO reports, because the GAO report, as far as I'm concerned, I think they're only breaking down. I think they said 277,000 acres of Chinese held U.S. farmland. So
mhm,
I don't know if that is, when they say Chinese held, is that Chinese individual citizens? Is that Chinese corporations? Is that Chinese government? That's something that would be nice to know,
yeah,
because right now they own about 277,000 acres. Okay, which in the grand scale of things not large, but here's the problem: a shocking portion of that, estimated at over 150,000 acres, Let me repeat that. 150,000 freaking acres of U.S. land that sits comfortably close to bases and key assets. So that would be like national critical infrastructure,
Yeah.
power plants, things like that.
Yeah, waterways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
not a rounding error. It's a
Yeah.
national security red flag.
Yep.
This is the point, folks. We're not talking about. So the reason I bring up these numbers is because I want people to understand there are people in this country right now who, for all intents and purposes, are communists. They may call themselves by a different name. And yes, I am talking about the Democrat Socialists of America. That is a communist organization. There are people who are beholden to Maoist philosophy. You can go and read it from their own words. There's plenty of documentation of this. But the
Mhm.
fact is that you've got Chinese communists that essentially right now they have 150,000 acres of land that is sitting very close to military bases or to key assets. That is crazy. Why
Yeah.
would we ever allow that?
Yeah, in Utah, there's about 33 to 34,000 acres that's under Chinese ownership, and much of that's next to Dugway Proving Grounds, which is where we did most of our summer trainings when I was in the Utah Army National Guard. And there are some highly sensitive facilities inside Dugway Proving Grounds. I mean,
Yep.
that was where that's where they trained with a lot of uh, nuclear testing and chemical testing in the early days. Matter of fact, much of my family,
Yeah.
they call them downwinders because of the testing that was done, and they got a lot of people with cancer south of there because of all of that. But highly sensitive facilities, like you're saying, they've got 33 to 34,000 acres that they own in Utah. Missouri
Yeah.
has
I mean, I'm just looking
42,000
at some of
acres.
I'm looking at some of the crazy information here, but there's right now. So this came out of the New York Post and the USDA mapping, right? Shows that at least
Mhm.
150,000 acres within spitting distance, basically under 10 to 30 miles of 19 plus military installations. From
Yeah,
Florida's MacDill Air Force Base, there's 9,952 acres in Polk County. To California's Camp Pendleton, 277 acres in San Diego County. A GAO's 2024 audit basically has slammed the USDA's own tracking of this as unreliable, meaning that the real number is likely much higher. Because, like I said, we don't know how much of, let's just say, maybe China has a controlling share or controlling ownership in a investment portfolio or whatever
mhm,
that owns land. I don't even think that's even being factored in.
yeah,
So it is absolutely crazy. But you've got hot spots right now that are, basically espionage central. So
mm,
Texas, I think, leads with 124,000 Chinese acres, including Sun Guanshin's 140-acre wind farm that you mentioned, right? So
yep,
that empire basically straddles Laughlin Air Force Base,
yeah,
complete with a private runway, just miles from pilot training ops and the Mexican border.
yeah.
I mean, you can't make this
Well,
stuff.
and the USDA has their AFIDA. It's called the Agriculture Foreign Investment Disclosure Act, and that's where you're supposed to report if you buy this farmland, what country you're with. But the problem is it's self-regulated
Oh,
primarily,
yeah.
and
So
so
that's interesting. So I was going to ask you about that because right
Mhm,
now, so like there's a committee called the CFIUS Committee,
mhm,
which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. I
yes,
would think that there would be a requirement for any foreign ownership of land, especially land close to military bases, that it would be required to be reviewed by CFIUS.
yeah.
And I'm surprised that any of this has ever been allowed. This is just absolutely crazy.
Well, that goes back to the complacency because CFIUS is now they're now, aware of this and actually going to work to reduce a lot of this or block this from happening. Recently up in North Dakota, a Chinese company was trying to build a wet corn milling plant right next to a military base up there, and they stopped it because it's now getting the attention it deserved. And that just goes back to the complacency, what they say in the military: complacency kills. And that's where we're at. You talked about hacking a minute ago, and this goes to foreign ownership of our food supply chain, our food system. JBS is the world's largest meat packer, beef company in the world.
Yeah.
They're fully Brazilian owned. And in 2021, if people remember when the store shelves were empty or when they were limiting the meat you could buy, it's because JBS got hacked by a Russian hacking organization, locked them out of their software, and they couldn't process for a week. And when you consider they're the largest in the nation, so multiple facilities weren't able to work. And some of those facilities are processing 6,000 head of beef a day.
Well, that's
and
a
other
whole
food.
nother issue too. I mean, I've had countless conversations with ranchers,
Mhm.
and they all have told me the same thing. They are being driven out of business by the meatpacking cartel,
Yeah,
and that's part of it right there.
it is.
Why in the hell would we allow foreign nations to own basically a monopoly like share of any production of something that is critical to U.S. sovereignty and national security, like food?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, two of the four companies control 85% of the meat in our country. Two of them are Brazilian companies. So 50% of the four is foreign entities. The largest pork producer is Smithfield. Smithfield is a Chinese-owned company. And so, that's kind of our whole mission From the Farm is to work towards a path where that's not where we rely on our food sovereignty. I mean, in the military, if you want to win the war, you take out the supply chain, because if you can't get beans and bullets, you're done. And our beans are completely under the control of multinational corporations, most of them of which are not American based. So we are in a very vulnerable position as a nation.
Hmm. It's interesting because I was just kind of looking up some information here, and I was wondering, this whole thing with CFIUS really concerns me, right?
Mhm.
Mainly because I was a federal whistleblower on another CFIUS matter, and that was the Uranium One deal. I blew the whistle on the FBI's cover up of Hillary Clinton's allowing of this purchase, right? They had all the evidence of money laundering and pay to
Mhm.
play. And they basically shut down all those investigations in order to allow that to happen. And so I was curious. I said, so I just did some research to say, okay, who was the Secretary of State? Because the Secretary of State basically is the chair of the CFIUS committee. I said, who was the Secretary of State when most of these Chinese purchases happened? And no surprise, it was Anthony Blinken under the Biden administration. And how much money did the Biden, family make from China?
Yeah.
I mean, look, they need to be investigating all of this.
Yeah.
This needs to be investigated. Like, this should never have been allowed.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Right.
crazy.
My family my extended family are the Bundy ranchers. And
Oh,
in
okay, yeah.
2014, when they went head to head with the BLM down there in Nevada, later it came out that Senator Harry Reid was working on a deal for a Chinese solar farm on the ground that they were leasing for grazing. And
Yeah,
so it was tied in there with China and these
absolutely.
backdoor deals for these politicians that are selling our country out. It's
Yeah.
it's uh it's crazy. Um, yeah, about 3.6. Well, let's see. It's something about 45 million acres. So the Farm Bureau just put a report out the first of this year. 45 million acres of farm ground is owned by foreign companies. China is one of the smallest, but they are an enemy. And
Yeah, I mean,
so,
they're clearly this is strategic for them. This is
yep.
not
And
about growing
no,
food.
no,
This is
it's
about
not.
spying on Americans.
Yep. But then along with those foreign companies that own farm ground, specifically related to the dangers of farm ground, Saudi Arabia owns a farm down in Arizona where they grow alfalfa, and they were getting it for they were renting state trust land for $25 an acre, but they had an unlimited source of water. They weren't regulated on how much water they could pump.
That's a
And
very good point.
And there were a lot of ranchers whose wells ran dry because they were sucking out the aquifers for their alfalfa and then shipping that. They were exporting our water essentially in a desert, where that's the most valuable resource is your water in the desert, especially when you're trying to produce food for your people. And so a lot of these farms around them, they couldn't compete. They couldn't afford attorneys to go fight them. And so they just went away. And so that's just the stuff we've been dealing with for decades. We finally have an administration that's starting to look at all this, which is great. And that's why this farm ground for China is being reduced, and a lot of these other things, like Trump just announced the investigation into collusion and the corruption of the big four packers. We've been begging for that forever to show that, and these companies have paid out billions of dollars in settlements for collusion and price fixing. And so we finally have an administration that's working on that. Earlier this year, Pete Hegseth and Secretary Rollins said food security is national security. Well, yeah, glad we finally have some people that are on board with this.
Yeah.
This
brings up a good point too. So let's just real quick, I want to kind of divert quickly on this issue of China to the point that there are other nations, some of which aren't our enemies, right? We have some allies that own a lot of land. In fact, the largest foreign owner of land in the United States is Canada.
Yes.
Now, here is the problem with that. There's been a lot of talk about, trade wars between the U.S. and Canada. There's a lot that goes on, in Canada that is very hostile towards U.S. markets, where we basically have kind of subsidized them for a very long time. This is especially true with like dairy farmers, for example. They've pretty much have, very, very badly damaged our dairy farms with some of their trade practices. And yet we allow Canada to own millions, tens of millions of U.S. acres of land.
Yeah.
What the hell? So when Trump wants to get a little bit testy with Canada, maybe this is one of the reasons why.
Yeah.
Because we are very kind to Canada in allowing them to use some of our agriculture land and own it, which I don't believe anybody other than U.S. Citizens should own. I'll be honest, I don't even believe corporations should own land. I think only citizens. And the reason I say that is because unlike capital, okay, and this is something that most people don't understand. When you look at the origin of capitalism and the ideas behind capitalism, John Locke is oftentimes quoted as the main kind of person who of Western philosophy. He was a European that really kind of created some of the principles of capitalism and explored that. One of the things that he was not for, he was all for people being able to have as much capital, meaning cash, as they could possibly have. He didn't want there to be any restrictions on that. He felt that people should be able to have and hold as much cash as they can possibly make. However, there were certain things that he did believe that needed to be regulated, and one of those was land ownership, primarily because land was something you could not create more of. Capital, you can create plenty of capital. There's no reason to restrict capital because, basically you can make widgets and people can buy them. But when you go to the place of allowing oligarchies or cartels to own resources that are, essentially things that we can't replace, that's where he was concerned. And land was one of the most important ones because, look, it's questionable. Of course, back then when John Locke was around, there was no such thing as oil and gas, right? But look, we've said, oh, we're going to run out, and then it turns out they're able to get more. So there are some. So it's questionable in my mind as to whether that is actually a resource we can actually run out of, or whether we'll ever run out of it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to land, you can't make more of it. I mean, granted,
Yeah.
China's trying to do that in the South China Sea with these sandbar islands that they keep building. But at the end of the day, there's no more America being created. We're
Yeah.
not expansionists. We're not going and taking over other countries. In fact, if anything, look what we did in Panama. We gave it back.
Yep.
I kind of question, the wisdom of that, but we did.
Well, we're seeing problems with the companies owning farmland now. For example, when a company can buy farmland or ranch land, it drives the cost of that up. When a ranch goes up for sale now, like I'm in Wyoming, the ranches around here in Wyoming, in Montana, they're tens of millions of dollars, right? There's a Pitchfork Ranch down the road that's up for sale for $67 million, and you could never raise livestock to ever pay for that. Well, that's happening because big corporations and also uh, oil tycoons and tech tycoons, they're coming in and buying it up, and that's driving the
Yeah.
cost of this land up. So you're
Bill
not going to
Gates.
have, you're not going to have families running these grounds anymore. In
Yeah.
fact, one of the issues in the beef side is a lot of these ranches are owned by these oil companies, and so it's skewing the value of the land and the value of cattle, where they're not making money on this ground because of cows. They're making money because of the mines or the oil fields. And so it's throwing off the numbers for everybody else, and it's causing a major problem. And now we have so much of this ground that's owned by folks that aren't, their primary focus isn't the production of food. And we became a net food importer for the first time last year. So it's not good. And to the Canada deal, Canada owns 15.3 million acres. And right now, a big conversation in the beef side is mandatory country of origin labeling. Most people don't know what this is. It's kind of surprising. When you buy beef from the store and it says product of the USA, it's likely not, because once it lands on shore, all they have to do is process it further, like take a rib roast and cut it into steaks, and now they can label that product of USA.
Mm.
And so mandatory country of origin labeling, called MCOOL, was repealed in 2015 because of Canada and Mexico and the WTO. And it's crazy when we know where our shirts come from, we know where our electronic devices come from, we know where everything in the world that we buy comes from, but we don't get to know where our food comes from. The most
Yeah.
important part of being a living organism, we don't get
Yeah,
to have that
I
transparency.
mean, I've been actually bringing this up even to our own ag commissioner here. I brought up major concerns over mRNA vaccines that they want to introduce into the cattle herds and things like
Yep.
that. And look, I don't want that crap in anything that I eat. I don't want it in my body, whether it's going in through the stomach or whether it's going in through a vaccine in my arm. I just don't want it. And my concern is that based on some of the recent research that has come out on these vaccines, the mRNA specifically, and what it does to the human immune system, essentially, basically turning it off, which is why you're seeing all of these super cancers and things like that. Imagine what happens if they start, because there's at least some level of human beings saying, I don't want this. Right? But animals can't talk. They can't tell you that. They could mandate and require this in in our cattle industry and literally wipe out entire herds. I mean, that's what I'm concerned about, is just the recklessness with what they're doing. We've already seen this happen with GMO and Monsanto and all of that, where they have basically they've wiped out farmers by basically planting genetically modified corn. A crow picks up some seed, drops it, in another farmer's land, and next thing you know, he's being sued out of existence. It is absolutely insanity.
Well, right now, this whole Bill Gates Bovar crap that's happening in Europe, the bovars, the feed that they're required to feed their cows that Bill Gates invented to reduce the methane of cows, and
Mm.
now their dairy cows are dropping dead.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that Bill Gates is behind a lot of this crap, right? He
Yeah.
is, he said it. He said it on a TED Talk that he felt that, the world needed to shrink its population by, I can't remember the amount, but it was some ridiculous number. And
Mhm.
then he went on to say that, we're doing a pretty decent job, with vaccines and contraceptives and all of that. So he admitted it right there.
Yep.
And this is the crazy thing. So this bastard goes on to buy up a bunch of American, farmland. Then he wants to outlaw, basically cow farts because of global warming. And at the same time, what is he investing in? He's investing in a company that creates fake meat that is
Mhm.
basically, created, on a printing machine with amino acids. And it turns out that what they're actually creating has the potential to cause cancer.
Yeah.
So yeah, this guy is like the quintessential megalomaniac wanting to destroy the world. I consider him as much of a threat to this country as the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, and they own the same amount of ground. Bill
Yes.
Gates owns 250,000 acres. China owns about the same. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. And
Now let
now
me
he's working on fake butter,
Oh
butter
gosh,
that
yeah.
doesn't
I
come
I'm not I
from
don't wanna touch
dairy.
anything this guy has to offer. Look, I
No.
don't even like Microsoft, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
although he's not so much involved in that anymore,
right.
that product has just been laden with bugs from day one, and I think they build those things in on purpose.
Oh, of course, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Build the product, build the cure, sell the
Yep.
cure.
Yeah. Seriously. That's probably where he got the idea to begin with.
Yeah, totally.
So
Yeah.
there's something interesting. So check this out. So the scale of Canada's squeeze right now, I want to talk
Mhm,
about that a little bit more because this extends to look. Yes, we got to deal with China and we need to deal with them quickly, and not just China. By the way, you've got a whole bunch of foreign adversaries, including China, Russia. Russia's involved with they're stealthily buying up stakes. They own about 25,000 acres of stakes in various investment funds in the U.S.
mhm,
Land market. But you also have Iran.
mhm.
Can you believe this? Iran owns, just under 1,000 acres. But like, why the hell would we give them an inch? And then North Korea. North Korea owns. Granted, it's less than 100 acres, but still, why would we allow North Korea to own any land in the U.S.?
Yeah,
And even Cuba, Venezuela, Syria, they all have some stakes in land here in the US. It is just absolutely nuts. But back to Canada. Here's the reason that Canada is an issue. So they own 15.4 million acres of US ag and forest land. Okay.
mhm,
That's 31% of the foreign holdings. And that's up from 12.8 million in just, from 2021. So they're clearly, they intend to buy more and more of it. Now it's mostly timber and renewables in Maine, Michigan, and Texas.
mhm.
And that's 1.2% of our total private farmland, but it's concentrated. And think about, there are entire countries that are locked up by Canuck LLCs, basically for wind farms or logging ops and things like that. And that's another issue that just bothers me like you wouldn't believe. And I get it. I understand. Look, farmers are hurting. I get it when they decide to put a solar farm on their land, but the damage that gets done to that land and the fact that we are not growing crops, it does concern me.
Yeah,
And I really I do think that it needs to be managed better. I think we need to be considering things like the cadmium, that if a hailstorm hits all of these these solar panels, you're now going to have radioactive ground
mhm,
from leaking, cadmium into the soil. The fact is that having those things on the ground creates a essentially a greenhouse effect underneath them, and basically kills off the soil and kills everything in the soil. So it doesn't make any sense why we are moving in the direction that we're moving, and I'm hoping that this current administration will turn things around. But But the thing is that going back to Canada, here's the big problem. So they right now, they're jacking up land prices sky high.
Mm-hmm.
You have a 15% spike in Corn Belt values last year alone, and it's pricing out family farms, and it's consolidating power in foreign hands.
Right.
I mean, that's just it. Look, Canada's our friend, but sure, until their investors outbid your kids' inheritance and turn Iowa into a timber colony.
Yep.
That's the problem. And reciprocity is a ripoff with them as well. They own our breadbasket, but we get provincial bans, full access, south of the border, but north provinces like Saskatchewan, they cap U.S. at 10 acres. Manitoba and Alberta slam doors on basically on big buys without exemptions.
Mm-hmm.
And even Ontario's eyeing tighter rules amid food security scares. It's a one-way street. Canadians snap up 40% of new acres in renewables while we're stuck leasing or begging approvals.
Yeah.
And it is tied to these trade wars. Absolutely. Trudeau's tariffs on U.S. dairy and softwood lumber has hit the U.S. hard. So why in the hell would we subsidize their economy with our soil? That's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's happening. They're buying our land, jacking the price up, and then using those the equity basically to hurt us.
Yeah. So what can we do about it? That's the thing that we're focused on, right? I do a lot of work in DC with policy work now, have been for the last few months. And like I said, we do have an administration and with Secretary Rollins actively working on these solutions, but we are fools to think that we need to rely on the government to fix these things, because we're like ping pong balls. The next administration, depending on who gets voted in, it may be somebody completely different, and then the pendulum swings the other way. But consumers have more power than they realize. And the reason our producers are where they're at now is they haven't had a marketplace. They haven't had a competitive marketplace. They've only had the controlled marketplace. But because of social media, they can reach out to consumers and connect with them directly. But now the consumer has a decision to make. The consumer needs to decide how important is, $6 a pound for ground beef that everybody's complaining about.
Yeah.
That's what the producer should make. If you went and raised a cow yourself, you'd realize that it's far worth that. But there's a lot more value. There's a lot more intrinsic value than just the nutritional density of the food you're eating.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually investing in ensuring that you have food 5 years from now. I mean, if we don't do this, and in 5 years later, the only thing we have an option for is lab-grown meat by Bill Gates, I promise you'll sit there and think, man, I would have sure hell been happy to pay $8 a pound today.
God help us if that happens. I hate to even think of becoming a vegetarian, but I would have to if that ever happened.
That's where we're headed. That's what people need to realize. That is where we're headed, unless the consumers make a shift and there's enough of them to make the shift fast enough. We only have 1.8 million farms and ranches left. There's 700,000 ranchers left in America. The average herd size is only 50. The only thing that will signal to these producers that it's worth it for them to stay involved and not lease their land to solar panels or sell it because big companies are paying is that the food they're growing has value to Americans beyond, what you're paying at Walmart.
Yeah.
And it's kind of goes back to, I can't remember who said it, but choose your hard. You may, like in my family, there's things that we cut out so that we could buy high quality, nutrient dense food right from our local farmers and ranchers. So there's things that we don't pay for, but it's far more worth it for us to have this than the other things, and so consumer behavior can change the whole game, but we need enough people to do it right away to turn this ship around, or it's not going to turn around. And that is the likely future. That's the probable, almost certain future of our food system. And that's the difference between food sovereignty and food security. Food security is you have a full belly. It might be fake meat, but your belly's full, so you're secure.
That's what's led to, things like diabetes and, all of
Yeah,
these diseases because of processed foods
yeah.
that we are facing in America today. It's interesting, you go back and just, 50 years ago, you didn't see people dying of the kinds of things that they're dying of today. And
No,
and
but
I
they
think it is
also
largely due to processed foods.
well, it is. We used to spend 30% of our budget on food and 8% on healthcare. But marketing by these clever companies, food organizations have convinced people that food is supposed to be cheap. So now we spend 6% of our budget on food, and if it's more than that, we complain about it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, that's
I
exactly
can't
what's
remember
happening.
who coined the phrase, but it was a famous saying, which is, "Food is medicine."
Yeah. Food is medicine. You pay the farmer now, or you're going to pay pharma later. It's that simple.
Yeah. And look, it's nowadays there's so much that we've learned about farming that I think this is the problem is that a lot of farms I think have turned to really poor methods of managing their farm because they didn't really know of any other way to keep up with all of these big corporate farms, and that truly is a problem. And so I do think that there is a market for this small family owned farm, and part of
Mhm.
that is organic, grown beef, and without all of the toxic chemicals in them, and
Yeah, the regenerative movement is exploding. In fact,
yeah,
what you're speaking to, most people don't know this, but just like eh, a lot of people are now aware that doctors that go to school get taught by the pharmaceutical companies how to do medicine, right? That's
yeah,
kind of something that we are aware of. A lot of people don't know that land grant universities where farms or future farmers are trained when they go to school, they're no different. They are funded by the chemical ag companies. So they didn't know any better. They just were taught that, and then it was handed down from one generation to the next. It hasn't actually been that long ago. My great grandfather didn't use chemicals. My great grandfather didn't use chemicals. They just started doing it within the advancement of our universities where they got captured because that's who paid for these universities, were these land grant universities. So now we have regenerative agriculture, which is coming around and is getting a lot more attention. And that's going back to how nature worked. Nature works as a whole.
it does.
And
It's
when
a
you
self-balancing system.
absolutely, absolutely. And so that information is now getting out there. Farmers and ranchers are starting to learn about that. Now, the problem is it's really expensive to implement because you've been doing it one way for so long. Now you need a new, no-till drill or something like that. So there has to be paths forward for the transition, but the awareness is out there now, and there's a lot of support coming that direction. And consumers, I've seen the reports myself from my ranching friends that have sent their meat in to be tested.
Hmm.
Re Regeneratively finished beef, what that means is the animal's eating, a dozen or so species of grasses, not just alfalfa, right? If
Right.
you're getting a grass-fed and finished steak, it might just be finished on alfalfa or a couple of species of forage. So I saw these reports, 67% increase in essential and non-essential amino acids, 75% increase in phytonutrients, and the omega-3 to 6 ratios were perfect. If you
Well,
wanna
it's no
heal
it's no
chronic health.
surprise. I mean, look, you are what you eat, right? And that's
Yep,
true of us, and it's also true of cattle. If
exactly.
they're eating junk food because it's cheaper and easier to keep them in feedlots and just give them, crap, yeah, they're not gonna be healthy.
Nope.
There's all kinds of things that, benefits to a variety of, grains and things like that, that they basically are it's nature's way.
Yeah,
So that
and
makes
and
that
the
makes perfect sense.
and the beef we eat now, people need to understand that by and large, the scale, like the average beef that you're eating from any grocery store, it's there because the company behind it has invested everything they can into figuring out how to get that cow born, raised, and slaughtered as fast as possible. Has nothing to do with the nutritional value. It's maximize efficiency for profit. They're now killing cows at 14 months. That's a calf,
Mhm.
but they've found ways to speed up their weight gain and just to get them on the shelf. And so it's void of many of the nutrients that you need, high in omega 6s, which causes inflammation. And if you look back at COVID, most people that were really poor in health and died from COVID were ones that had high inflammation. Well, that comes from omega 6.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely. There's an interesting thing too, I think that plays into all of this. You know, I remember watching a documentary years ago, and it was talking about the Dust Bowl.
Mm,
And you know how that was like kind of a wake-up call to America. Number one, that we needed to change the way that we farmed, right?
mhm.
That we needed to change the way that like cattle grazing and things like that happened because it led to this major essentially famine, in our country. And we've not had a famine, and I'm grateful. So there's part of me that like is totally excited, right, about technology and the ability to do things. Like there's a balance, right? There's a balance between doing things in a way that's efficient and that maximizes the amount of food that you can grow on 1 acre of land, right? And that's
Right.
great.
Yep.
But at the same time, we've got to do it in a way that produces, number one, nutritious and healthy food, and and regenerates the soil so that we're not losing topsoil and things like that. We've got to do things in ways that we're not poisoning ourselves with you know all of the toxic chemicals that are sprayed.
Yep.
I think about wheat is a great example. In order to brown wheat, they spray all of these chemicals on it. They spray on our corn. That's why they genetically modify corn so they can spray, Roundup. And
Yeah.
basically you end up with
Yeah.
corn that is constantly in a stress state and
Yeah.
producing all kinds of estrogen mimickers and all of this stuff. So we
Yeah.
got to figure out a way, to this is the kinds of things that I would like to see, like far as research being done within, the administration, is
Yeah.
finding ways to produce more crops, finding ways to deal with pests, because pests are a real problem.
Mhm.
But finding ways of doing it to where it's not killing us by spraying toxic chemicals. And then
Yeah.
here's the other interesting China aspect. That why is it that every freaking invasive species of bug and plant that is destroying our crops comes from China? I
Yeah.
mean, like even COVID came from China. So it's
Well,
like
recently they caught some girl coming into the country from China that had
with some
a
fungal spore, right?
fungal spore that would have caused major devastation to our
Our crops. Yeah.
crops. Yeah, and now you got the New World screwworm going on down in Mexico that we're trying
Oh
to keep out of the
gosh.
country. I mean,
That is so disgusting. I mean, that thing is
yeah,
nasty,
yeah,
it's like straight out of, like a horror movie, right? Where you got
yeah,
some fly laying eggs under your skin. It's gross.
yeah.
But yeah,
People have died from it. I mean,
well, look,
um,
we didn't have Chagas disease in this country until they started opening the doors on our borders to allow illegal immigrants from South America to flood into our country.
mm,
Now we've got a resurgence of, or not resurgence, we've for the first time ever, we've got cases of Chagas, which is
I did hear that.
from the sleeping bug,
Mhm.
that basically it injects this parasite that goes straight to your heart and causes heart inflammation.
Yeah,
We've got, things like Zika, which came to Florida, from a foreign country. We have, I think now they're saying that tuberculosis is on the rise. Tuberculosis. Look,
yeah,
at one point that was like the number one killer in America, and we got rid of it. Malaria, same thing. It's like, so all of these things that we're dealing with have primarily been because they have not been careful about what they've allowed to come into our country.
that's right. Yep,
Unbelievable.
yep, absolutely right.
So tell people about, we watched the commercial at the beginning
Mhm.
of the show. Tell people about what you're doing, and how, tell people about your product, your company, what you guys are doing, and explain that, because I'm sure there's at least a few farmers on the show and ranchers
Yeah.
that are listening.
Yeah. Well, I can't share it without telling you that this is definitely driven by God. God spoke to me in 2020 and said this had to be done. And in the method and how we're doing it is all by his design. Now, we learn from our farmers and ranchers as we go on what'll work best. But it's the easiest way to describe it is think of like the Etsy or the Airbnb of local
Mhm.
food. The vision is to cut out or solve all the middle parts with the technology that we're creating so that we can simplify the process of getting it from the farm to the consumer. And then a big part of that is the marketing. It's reaching the consumers and getting them to come to one central place to go and shake the hand that feeds them. We don't take any commission. That was all part of the design and vision. So we had to work really hard to find ways to make this profitable without taking commission off of the food dollar, because our farmers and ranchers need 100% of that retail dollar in order to stay viable. And marketing is really challenging. You go ask your average farmer or rancher and tell them they've got to market and go meet the customer. Like, it's game over right there. They don't want to be on social media. And so that's our vision, is to create this marketplace that God influenced us to do, and do it in a way that has them as the focal point, their priorities and their focuses first. So we say, serve the farmer first, serve the consumer second, and then we have faith that God will make sure the company works. And so that's what it is. So you go to fromthefarm.org. We've got 100 producers in 35 states across the nation. We are very adamant that we don't take money from the wrong people, because I'm afraid that if we do, they'll say, look at all this money we're making these guys. Let's add a 10% commission. And then 20 years from now, it's a captured market again. So it's all organically growing. That's why you might not see anybody close to your home yet, because I didn't go raise $10 million to do these massive marketing campaigns. But we're just letting God guide us on how to build this. And so that's the vision, is to help people go right to the source. The idea is that if we can make a marketplace that is that works so well for our farmers, it will build the path for all those people that are sitting in the city in a cubicle, wishing they could be on a farm growing food. And then all of a sudden, just like Airbnb, there's such a demand for it that they have a path to get out of the city, out of the cubicle, get on their own piece of ground, grow food, and sell it to their neighbors. That's how we rebuild the American food system.
It's been a while since I've looked at your website, and I'm really kind of excited to see that you guys have picked up at least one farm that's not too far from me. Because for a while there, I was like, dang, man, I would love to use this, but the closest farm was like 300 miles away, and now there's one that's like 50 miles away.
Awesome.
And I'm also seeing another thing too on your site, which is pretty cool, which is that it's not just beef anymore. There's one farm here that's got like kombucha and honey and sourdough bread and duck eggs and coffee and all kinds of stuff. That's awesome, because I want to be able to get more products from a place where I know the product is good, right?
Yeah.
And
we're growing.
And I'll tell you what, I would love to, after the show, we got to definitely connect, because I would love to connect you, with our agriculture commissioner here in West Virginia. I know him personally. He's a good friend of mine. And I know a lot of farmers and a lot of ranchers in West Virginia, because I ran for Congress. So I was all over the state getting to know them and meeting them. And I'd love to, introduce you to some of them, because I want to be able to buy through your website, buy products directly from, farmers that are nearby me.
Yeah. You're Kent's your ag commissioner.
Yep. Great guy.
Yep. I just met him yesterday. In fact, I was in Kentucky at the Ag Commissioners Conference. I didn't get a visit with him a whole lot, so he won't probably remember me. But
I would love if you want to come out here to West Virginia, I will personally take you down there to meet him and introduce you to him and get you some FaceTime. He's a great guy. And what they're doing here, and he's a pivotal guy, because he's like the head over, the Agriculture Commissioners Association of America or something like that. So he's got a very important role. In fact, I went and saw him, about some cybersecurity stuff, because the fact is because of who he is. Our ag office gets hacked all the time. Like, they're constantly being hit, with attacks from our enemies. And so, I had a meeting with him and introducing him to some of, one of my executive accountants, managers who deals with cybersecurity products.
Well, if you guys are if your listeners are in Appalachia, I'm telling you, I was so inspired by the work that the Appalachia Proud is doing. They are very focused in that region on getting local food to local families. And if the whole rest of the nation was as adamant about that as those folks are, as those ag commissioners in those 6 different states that are all part of that, we would see a game changer. And that's their hope too. So I'm hoping to, and looking forward to working with them and simplifying that process for producers in Appalachia. I'd love to come out.
That's so important. Well, I'm really grateful for you coming on today. We've talked about a lot of different things,
Yeah.
and but the truth is, it is a complex issue. It's not.
Mhm.
It's very nuanced. It's not
Yep.
just a single issue. It's not just about China. It's also about Canada. It's also about Brazil. It's also about the meat packing cartel. It's also about sustainable, farming and doing things in a way that is both efficient and financially viable, but also sustainable so that you're not contaminating soil with, it's a unique situation, right?
It
Farmers
is.
are generally conservative. There are a group of people that are often patriotic and God fearing because, as my father in law tells me, he grew up or spent a lot of time living up in North Dakota, where they depend on farming, and they don't basically they don't have irrigation. So
Mhm.
the bottom line is they depend on God to bring the rain.
Yep.
And that right there, it really does make you have faith, because you have to trust in God that He's going to help your crop to succeed, and that it's not going to be destroyed from weather and pests and pestilence and everything else.
That's right.
So it is I think there's a lot that that I know that I have, even though I don't consider myself, I may raise some chickens, but and I might raise some vegetable garden of my own, and that's about as much farming as I get the opportunity to do. But I've got so much in common with most of the farmers that are out there. I mean, we are really, I think, to the same heart. And I really love our farmers of America and our ranchers, and I want to see them be successful and be able to continue to produce quality food for us. And so I'm very grateful for what you're doing, and very grateful to all of them out there that are coming aboard with you. And I think there needs to be more people coming aboard. So I'm
Yep.
excited about it, and I'd love to help you in any way that I can.
Yep. Amen. Thanks, Nate. We could use that help. It's gonna take us all, that's for sure.
It is, and it's going to take God's help. So, with
Uh-huh.
that, I always like to end my show with prayer, because I recognize that we need God's help. But before we close in prayer, why don't you tell people, where can they find you? Where can they go to your website?
Mhm.
Are you on social media? All of that. Go ahead and give us that info.
Yep. Our website is fromthefarm.org. All of our social media channels are From the Farm USA. We've got a podcast that we do very irregularly that's done here through StreamYard, but then it goes on to our YouTube channel, From the Farm USA. You could follow me personally on Instagram if you'd like. It's _J_Richards. And that's the best way you can get involved in seeing what we're up to.
Awesome, awesome. And folks, please, please reach out to your Congress members, to both in the House and the Senate, and in your state legislature. Too many people forget that we've got a state legislature as well. And a lot of these rules, when it comes to, look, if the feds don't act, the state has more power than you would believe to act, and they could put the kibosh on, some of these countries investing in land and farmland in their states. So you need to reach out and speak to your representatives, both at the federal and the state level, and your county commissioners, and all of the people, your ag commissioners, to bring this problem to light. They already know about it, but they've got a lot of issues they're dealing with. So if you want this to be an issue they're going to focus on, it takes us reaching out to them to make sure they know that this is important to us. That way they will engage, they will do something about it. Look, I know when I first went and talked to my ag commissioner on a couple of issues, and he wasn't really spun up on them. It wasn't a big deal for him, because he's just trying to deal with some other major project problems and projects, to help our farmers. But I brought up this issue, and I got other people to contact them, and you know what? And now they've started looking into some of these things. So it takes us not just sitting on the sidelines, but actually engaging and respectfully, bringing these issues to those people who we've elected. Believe me, they want their constituents to be happy. And so we have the ability to have some influence, and to be able to make change, but it takes us calling and reaching out. Folks, if you haven't checked out the website, please do go and check out the website, fromthefarm.org. It's where you're going to find all the information on the great things that they're doing. You can search on there, for a site near you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that up real quick here. Hold on. I'm going to just pop up that website so you guys can see it. Hold on 1 minute. There it is. So let me just show you guys what the website looks like. It's pretty cool. So you guys can go here, and from here you guys can put in, if there's a particular farm that you're interested in, or you can just, I like this right here, farms near you. Like I said, for me, the closest one is, it's going to pick up, in my case, it's picking up the closest big city to me. And then it's, telling me, where the closest farm is that participates in this. For some of you guys, it might be a lot closer.
If you click that button right down that says show farms on map at the bottom, that black button right in the middle,
nice.
Just to give you an example and zoom out.
Great. That's
And if
awesome.
you zoom out, you'll see all of our farms as they are set up throughout the country. So depending on where you're at, you can shop through the website that way, or you can go to that home page and just put your zip code in. And so we're getting there.
Fantastic. And you know what? I know I'm going to definitely, I want to introduce you to some ranchers I know that are out in Eastern Oregon as well. I did some work with them and know a lot of those guys out there. I don't see that on here on the map. So
yeah,
we
need them. We need them.
Yep. No, that's fantastic. So yeah, guys, they're growing. This map had a lot less, on it, a year ago when I first looked at it. So I'm excited to see that you guys are growing. When you guys go to look at stuff, you can see here, I'll just give you an example. This is the one farm I was telling you about, that's not too far from Warrenton.
Yeah, go back real quick. Let's go to Purple Mockingbird, because those folks are great. They do kombucha. But Purple Mop, he's the gentleman right there with the family, right where you're at.
Right here.
Yeah, click there. He's a veteran.
Oh, nice.
Great people. Don't know what product he's got in stock right now, but yep.
Oh, look at that.
Got a few things there. Sirloin.
Look at that. That looks so good. I love meat, man. I'm a meat.
So am I.
So that is fantastic.
Yeah.
So so guys, you can go on there. You can see, you can see what products they have. So these guys are primarily, it's just mostly meat there. But I'll give you an example of another one that is not far from me. I think it was, let's say the apiaries. That's going to be honey and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Virginia honey. Look at that, all local honey being grown there. There's a lot of options here, folks, and you should check it out. It's pretty exciting.
And people will ship too. So if you can't find anybody close to you, they'll ship right to you, and you'll do all that through the website. That's
great. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show and for sharing this with us. Such an important thing that you guys are doing. And let's go ahead and close this out in prayer.
Yeah, please.
Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for AJ and what he's doing, Lord, and for his From the Farm dream and vision. God, I just pray that you would bless the efforts that he has put into this, and the that you would bring fruit from that labor, Lord, that there would be more and more farms that would join in this as a fight against the system, that they would break, this cartel, Lord, that has been just so destructive to the family farm, but help us to be able to find a way, Lord. And I pray, God, that you would just bring great success to this, that you would expand it, that a year from now, Lord, that it would be more than double in size of what it is now. And that you would bring the right farms and the right farmers, to From the Farm, that would be bringing great products that are healthy, and that are, not full of toxins and things like that. God, we pray for your blessing on America's farmers and ranchers today. Lord, they have a hard road ahead of them. And for many of them that are getting older, and maybe they have kids that don't want to go into the farming business, Lord, we pray that you would bring young people into farming, that you would raise awareness, and that you would help our country to stay strong with our food and with that food sovereignty. Lord, we thank you for the show, and we thank you for all of those that are listening. Pray your blessing on them. And Lord, we just ask for America to be successful in this effort. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well,
Thank you.
folks, thank you so much for joining. We have about 1,400 people on tonight listening, and it's been a great show. AJ, I want to thank you again, and stick around for, after the show ends. I'd like to just, pass contact information to you and set up a time where we can connect.
Great. Thanks, Nate. Thanks for having
All
me.
right. Absolutely. Guys, all of you, God bless you. Stay strong, stay engaged, and stay free. With that, have a good night.
Raise some cane. You gotta raise some cane. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some cane, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some cane.